Well, today is our first session of Choose Your Story, Change Your Life by Kindra Hall, our book study. We're only going to have 3 sessions, so it's going to be quick, but it's going to be powerful. Today we're going over the intro and section 1. And we have about 9 questions. We'll see how much Francine and I get through within the time frame. And yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
So, right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're here. And as I told everyone, even if they didn't do the reading, it's okay. Like, we're going to get so much out of this and great discussion. So,
yeah.
And
I love how Kindra put this book together because you don't have to read from start to finish. I mean, it really is in manageable sections, and you could pick up anywhere. And because it's kind of like what we do, Chelsey. It's the same material, but she just shows how it shows up in different people's lives. So it's a great, you'll probably find yourself identifying with some of these people.
Right. Because we're gonna start with Mike, right? I think, at least for me, I can totally identify to Mike, that getting stuck, being stuck feeling. And it's like, I think that's where most of us tend to be, and most of the people that we work with start out, it's that place of frustration between what you want, but not doing anything to bridge the gap, right? And I think eventually you either get jaded, right, because you don't take any action to move towards bridging that gap, or you get fed up and you start taking action, and then you are no longer stuck. Right. Yeah. Okay. So Mike, have you been in a similar position as this, Francine?
I have been in a similar position. Actually, in case you don't know me, I just wanted to introduce myself just very briefly. But so my name is Francine Rolling, and I live in Central Missouri, and I'm a mindset and gut health coach for women. And if I had to describe myself with an adjective, and I'm not even sure this is an adjective, but I'm making it one, I would describe myself as, the adjective I'd use is overcomer. And that is a story that I have told myself because I've had experiences of my life that statistics show wipe a lot of people out. Culture shows that it wipes a lot of people out. There's movies of the week about things that have happened, but I have found that whenever you experience a hard time, it could either teach you a lesson and help you grow from that, or it can wipe you out, because life is hard, and sometimes you get wiped out for a little bit, no matter what your stories are, right? But when I see myself as an overcomer, it just helps me know that this is not the end of my story. This is just a really juicy chapter right now, so I can keep going. And I do identify with Mike because for not a large part of my life, but a good chunk of my life, I was a single mom. And when I was a single mom, my primary income came from my job as a school social worker. And so I had a string of bosses. I had building principals, and I had administrators above that, and I had school board, and even the teachers were kind of my bosses, because my job was to help enhance what they were providing to the kids and to the families. And so that was a part of my life too, when I actually am the person who created the school social work program in the district where I worked, and it's going to this day. So that's amazing. Now, the problem.
That is amazing. I didn't know that, Francine.
It's awesome. Yes, it's fabulous. The issue, though, is I'm a person who used to define my success by what I accomplished, right? And so created a school social work program. That's great. And I got a lot of kudos for that for a long time. But such is life. And like these people who I worked for, they're people, right? And we don't always see eye to eye with everybody, and their expectations may be different than my expectations. And the people who were my administrators when I started the program, they understood the vision. We were all on the same page. And I was there for 19 years. So people came and went. And when new people came, they didn't have the same vision, right? They had their own vision. We all do, right? We bring our own unique views into whatever we're doing. And so that created some conflict sometimes. And I, um, I remember just feeling really bad and actually even thinking about quitting several times, but feeling stuck because I was a single mom and that was my primary source of income. That was insurance. It was all the things, right? And so I had to figure out how to make those differences of opinions and my vision align and come together. And so it was definitely a learning experience. But I remember having many moments like Mike where I just felt like, well, maybe this was all a charade. Like maybe I really wasn't talented. Maybe this wasn't something that, was really valuable. Maybe I just had a bunch of yes people around me, who liked me and so let me go for it. And but anyway, I just wondered how you, Chelsey, or anybody else listening to this, maybe can identify with that. Like, um, when has somebody else's opinion just really knocked you down a notch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Well, maybe I should introduce myself since you introduced yourself. Well, I'm Chelsey Holm. I'm also a mindset coach, specifically growth mindset focused, like how to get your brain to work for you by understanding it and getting to the root of the problems, kind of like we do in health, right? We want to get to the root cause instead of just band-aiding it and masking it with, like to call them, Francine, fluffy affirmations. Right. I'm also a mom of 5 and a military wife, so I am not new to challenges, being the new person in the community, and feeling uncomfortable at all times because change is uncomfortable, but growth is always on the other side of getting uncomfortable. And so, like, I love to help other women who are like us, who have a high capacity that we see that we have a calling in our lives and we want to help people, but we have to get out of our own way. And so I love helping other women do that too, getting out of their own way. Kind of like Mike, like, on page 5, he said in 25 years, he never left. He always stayed. And I think that that's something that I've been relating to a lot. What were these stories I had, specifically physical fitness, what's possible for me, in money, what's possible for me, and also just in like nutrition, looking at it from a different angle. And so those are 3 areas where I've been challenged because I was in that gap of I'm looking at where I am, right? When you actually get honest and look at yourself in the mirror and really see like, wow, yep, this sucks. Like, I kind of suck right now. And that's okay. Like, it's not anything negative towards us. It's just owning the fact. And I've had lots of those situations recently where looking at myself, looking around and saying, like, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. Well, what am I going to do about it? Like, am I just going to continue to stay here for, like Mike, 25 years and continue to be frustrated and let it build, being a victim of my circumstances? And not even my circumstances a lot of times. It's more my mindset, right? Like a victim of my mindset, because like specifically for fitness, I grew up, like I remember a very specific instance of being in the car with one of my friends when we were probably like 9 or 10. And she was like, oh, my thighs are so big, because we were sitting in the back of her Jeep. And I looked down and my thighs were like twice her size. And like from that moment, I was just like, oh, like I'm bigger than everyone else, right? Which is actually not true. Like it's totally a skewed belief. Like we were not the same. We did not have the same frame. We did not have the same build. And I think that that story was driving a lot for me and what was possible. And so it was starting to show up in going through the motions of working out, but not really challenging myself, like setting big goals for my health, more like setting kind of what I think I should, checking the box, but not actually embodying that, and so I think that that's where I relate so much to Mike, is really that looking around of like, I don't like this. What am I going to do about it? And I don't want to wait 25 years to still be in the same place, but with buckets more of frustration,
I just read a quote, and let me try. I'm notorious this is not a story. This is fact. I'm notorious about jumbling quotes,
Hey,
but
that's
it was
okay.
it was something along the lines about you fear change because you are afraid you're going to suffer, but that fear is already causing you to suffer, basically, you know. So staying stuck is painful as well, right? But it's common. So many people are in that bucket, and there's a sense of comfort to it also, because it's not the fear of the unknown. You can handle the things you know are going to, you know, continue to happen, you know, unless something changes. And sometimes, you know, as you being a child, Chelsey, like you had limited ability to like remove yourself from situations. Like, I mean, not that your parents had anything to do with your view about your thighs, but I mean, if let's say they did, like, it's not like you can just get up and move across the country. You're a child, right? And there may be situations even as an adult, like it's not easy to leave a job or leave a relationship, or I mean, all of that stuff takes not only a shift in your mindset, but you got to line up different things too, to make that all happen. So I don't want anybody to think that we're like, oh yeah, change your mindset and, you know, it's all going to fall into place. That's the first step for sure. And that will continue to propel you forward, but it all takes time. And it's interesting because when we coach people on the business, we always talk about starting with mindset, and then you could implement strategy. Well, even if you're here for personal reasons, there's still strategy. Like you know, if say you want to move to a different house, I mean, there's a strategy to that, right? I mean, maybe you are a little bit afraid to move because maybe this is the house that you raised your kids in. Maybe you remember all these holiday gatherings, and you know, all that emotional stuff is there. And then you know, you maybe your house maybe it's paid for, or it's, you know, your mortgage is very doable, and there's other expenses that come with a new house. Maybe, you know, you don't know if that sewer system is really as good as, you know, the person who came and inspected it said it is. I mean, there's all these fearful things. So deciding to move is the first step. Like that's how you change your story. Your story needs to be one that says something more like, you know, moving is right for my family. Moving is exciting. This is going to be, you know, there's so many more great things that are going to happen by us moving. But then logistically, do I have enough money to do this? You know, is the right house on the market for us? Is that person going to accept our offer? How are we going to get all of the belongings from place A to place B? I mean, so there's a logistical part of it too, but yeah, it starts with that mindset, and then relationships. If that thing that you're wanting to shift is a relationship, that can get even more sticky. So give yourself some grace in all of this.
Right. Well, and I think that's what we always say, like wrap it in curiosity and compassion, right? Get curious about like, okay, well, why am I here? And I love that you said that. Like, it is logistical, but it also stories. And she said on page 9 that at its root, a self story is a habit, the pattern of automatic thinking that we're often unaware of. Right?
Yeah.
And so like it does start with that, like look in the mirror or look at the finances or look at the housing industry, if you know, or whatever it is. And getting honest with where we are, what we need, where we want to go, right? But it can't start unless we have that awareness around the stories that are actually driving us. You know, I had these stories of like, you know, I'm bigger than everyone else, and you know, and I think, and I also actually in the shower is the best time to do story work, honestly. Like if you're not journaling, if you're just thinking, you're in the shower, like best time. But I was thinking about this, like as I'm like leveling up and I'm going through this fitness journey, like lots of stories are coming up. And also like I'm just bringing awareness to some other stories I didn't even know were there. Like, and I had this thought in the shower. I was like, I think that I've always had this idea that if I really pushed myself to work out really hard, the goal has to be skinny, and that's never been my goal. And so there's like that disconnect of like when your story is driving you, but it's not aligned with what it is that you actually want, you're not going to show up and do it. right? Like your brain's going to be like, yeah, no, that doesn't feel like, because for me, belief and authenticity are really important. So when I have a disconnect there in what I'm doing and where I'm going, like it's like that plane that has a 1% difference in path is going to be hundreds of miles off of its actual destination. It's like that too. But yeah, I think that we can all relate to Mike in this, that you know, we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And actually a lot of things that we do know, we actually need to unlearn. And there are things that we need to learn anew, right? Like I had to learn, like I don't have examples in my family of people who are super fit. You know, I have examples in my family of people who would sporadically work out. I had lots of examples in my family of people who would complain about how they looked but never do anything about it. I had examples of friends who were not happy with the way that their body was, right? Like, so I have all of that history and backstory, right? That formed the beliefs that I had about myself without me even really being aware of it. It's not like I was like, oh, I'm going to take that story and I'm going to take that story, you know, right? But like now in my life with bringing that awareness, it's what story am I choosing, right? Just like you said, like with moving is exciting, or, you know, whatever it is, like what is the story that's actually going to drive the actions that we want?
Well, and families, I'm glad you mentioned families, because that's where our stories originate from, is our family, right? I mean, that's where you spend a good chunk
our environment.
Yeah. And with my family, there were a lot of stories around fear. And so even though I wasn't, I think fear is taught personally. Kindra doesn't say that, but Francine Rowling will say that. I think fears are taught. I
totally believe that. I totally believe that. I mean, think about our kids. If you're like, oh, we have to have a nightlight because we don't want it to be dark in here. Well, your kids are going to be like, well, why is the dark scary?
Right?
Some of that comes naturally in human nature, but
right. And so okay, that Chelsea, you just always get me thinking. So that raised something out. But back to my family of origin though. So stories of fear. So like when I had a desire, you know, to change something big in my life, like it was like them putting on the brakes. You can't do that. Like this could happen, you know, somebody could die, whatever it is, you know, all the things. But it wasn't about me. I mean, yes, of course they loved me, but like whenever we really are a system. And so when you change, all those people in your life, they feel that energy as well, right? So if somebody does have a lot of fear and you're looking to make a change, like it's their stories are talking to them too. So why it's so important. I think the statistic or whatever is like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I mean, that's really important to be very guarded in a healthy way about who those 5 people are, who you're listening to and letting into your inner circle, because they will influence you and you will influence them. So just pay attention to that. You know, so this weekend we had my grandson here and we met his parents in another town to trade back. And I took a wrong turn and I ended up in the middle of a parade.
I saw that.
Yeah, literally in the middle of a parade. And my other daughter is with me and we were just cackling because I mean, what are you going to do, you know? And so we're waving and it's a small town.
Candy,
everybody's like, okay, that's weird. But and my grandson in the back seat was laughing too. He had no idea what was going on, you know, but he was laughing because we were laughing. And I thought, oh, isn't that profound? If I'd been angry or distressed or something, I think he probably would have responded differently. But he picked up on that vibe right in the car. So anyway, it just reminded me of what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, and as you were saying that, I was thinking about she talks about like the storytellers around the campfire a lot, right? Like just think of the person at the campfire who's like, I'm gonna go on, you know, I heard some water rushing in this direction and you know we need water and I'm gonna go try to find it. And can you imagine like everyone else around the fire, oh no, you're gonna die, like you can't do that, like that's dangerous, like you've never done that before, we've never left this radius, you know, I'm sure they didn't say radius, I probably didn't know what that was, but you know, like and that's so true that you have to have this step back of looking at the big picture and be able to realize when you're the big fish in the small pond and that you need to get out of the small pond and you need to put yourself into a bigger pond where there are bigger fishes than you. That feels scary because, there's always a danger that they might eat you. But if you're putting yourself into the right pond, you're going to be able to learn from the bigger fishes, right? And you're going to be able to expand your belief because they're doing things that you're not doing yet, And so that's why I love like book studies like this and masterminds and like our collab coaching, because people are putting themselves into positions where they're surrounded by other people who are also growing. And it's a totally different vibe than people who are stuck in their ways, and we know who they are. They are known by their complaints without action and no desire to change, but simply to complain about everything, right? So I think that, that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, and before we leave Mike too, I found a statistic about, it was a 2022 Gallup poll. And I mean, it was 2 years ago. Right. I couldn't find anything newer, but at that time, job dissatisfaction in America was at an all-time high. And another study showed that over half of Americans were thinking about changing jobs. And I suspect that has not changed, right? I mean, we talk to people all the time who are looking for something else, right?
And probably even higher now, honestly.
Yeah. Right. So if you're listening to this, if you're reading this book, and that is you, sometimes, again, hearing, those people, those 5 people around you, they may be some of those people that are stuck, and they may be making you feel like a weirdo because you're sick of being stuck, right? And you're considering something else. So again, it's your story. What are you going to make of that? Is that going to be, well, isn't that interesting that they all feel that, this isn't the thing to do? But I do. So examine why it's important for you. I was listening to a podcast this weekend. It was Oprah Winfrey and Al Roker, and they both turned 70 this year. And they were just kind of doing a recap of different things that, were really pivotal moments in their lives and things that they learned. And one of the things that Oprah said is she has really learned to trust her gut as she's gotten older. But even when she was young, that was always there, but she couldn't speak to it or really identify what it was because nobody around her taught her how to listen to her gut. As far as she knew, nobody was doing that. They were more on survival mode. She grew up in poverty, and but she remembers being a child and being at her grandmother's house. They lived in rural Mississippi, very impoverished, and her grandmother was like shucking corn or doing some household task. And she said to Oprah, "Make sure you pay attention because you're going to have to do this one day." And Oprah, as a child, she remembers thinking, "No, I'm not." And she said, "It wasn't that I was being disrespectful. A part of me knew, no, I'm not. Like, I am not going to be living in Mississippi, farming my own food. Like, I feel like there's something bigger." And then as she went to college and became a broadcast journalist and all the things, she said, everybody on the national market in journalism, like getting to New York City was like the big thing. Everybody wanted to get to New York. And she never wanted to get to New York. For some reason, she felt like Chicago was where she needed to be. And all these people around her, like, "You are crazy. New York is the place." And like people are wanting her to interview there and everything. But she's like, I just don't think so. I think Chicago is my place. That's my market. And she went to Chicago, she was a journalist. I mean, that's where the Oprah Winfrey Show started. She has her own network now, all these things. And she said that probably would not have happened had she listened to the people around her who were just doing what the norm did, right? The majority of people did this. So they thought she should be doing it too. But she said, those things worked out. And there's times in her life where she didn't listen to her gut and she listened to the people around her. And she did talk about, I mean, you don't want to turn down completely the voices of those around you, especially if they're in your 5, right? But ultimately, listen to, she kept calling it your gut, but she's talking about your stories. Like, your brain knows, your heart knows, just get quiet, get in the shower, journal, take a walk, do wherever you can be to just eliminate as many distractions as possible. So you can hear what it's an energy inside you that knows what the next step is. We just need to listen to ourselves more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that that's an interesting concept that I think easily gets construed by a lot of people because it's like, oh, well, just follow your heart or, trust yourself and,
Yeah.
How do you feel? And it's like, well, feelings are indicators, I think, that, of the story, right? Because feelings are usually easier to identify, where like behaviors are the biggest thing to identify. But this is something that I've been learning too with trusting my gut, because I've always had very strong gut reactions to things. And, a lot of times I would, ignore it, and I would go to pen and paper and do like a pro con list, right? Or like, engage my head instead of listening to my gut. And it wasn't about following my feelings, because a lot of times what my gut was telling me to do was something that was completely against the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't make sense in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart was afraid, like, this is crazy. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, this is going to get some backlash, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're so right there that, like, it's not about this trusting our feelings or even our head or our heart. It's about trusting that gut feeling that we've had since being kids, but we've quieted it and silenced it over the years for making lists and, weighing our options and the voices of those around us. Yeah. So I think that's so good, which kind of brings us to Roberta's story, because she had some of that, right? Like, about what was possible.
I love
for
Roberta.
her. Yeah, I do too. I think, like, because she was really looking at kind of like A and B options, but not realizing that there's actually something else that could be there that hasn't been done yet. Or, it's kind of, it goes along with that step back idea of looking at the whole thing instead of just looking at exactly where you are, very narrow, like being able to step back. And I know we've talked about that inside Collab coaching too, of like the step back, let's look at the whole thing. Like, what's really going on here? What's the thing under the thing that's actually the thing, and not just I'm avoiding doing that one thing, right? Like, but what's really going on?
Yeah.
What's the story that's driving it? What's the framework, the perspective that's, creating the emotion?
Right.
That's prompting the things you're doing or not doing. And that's actually creating the outcomes in your life.
Yeah.
Because it's the story, and you have to be able to identify that. And
something Roberta had going on that you alluded to, Chelsey, she what was she, an engineer, I think, or a landscape architect, right? So, but she wants to be a health coach. And one of the things that was getting in her way, and I suspect if she had done a pro-con list, I mean, to be a landscape architect, like, you have to have schooling and, I'm sure, like, internships and, very specific things. So what I see happening frequently with women or men who want to become health coaches is that, especially if they come from jobs or backgrounds where a lot of education was required, they're like, well, I can't do this. I'm not, I'm not certified. I don't have this degree. I don't have this. I don't have that. And it's a different thing. But again, it's a story, right? I mean, Roberta has a lot of things in her background that would make her very capable as a health coach, even though she may not have a degree per se. So that story can pop up, I'm not qualified. Well, what determines who's qualified and who's not? That's something we're digging into.
You're right, because that's driven by a societal story, right? Like we know the big ones are go to college, get a good job, retire. Like, and we've seen that shattered. And actually, I was doing a finance course through Grant Cardone, and he'll just blow your mind about money stories because they're not true. But he was talking about, he's all about numbers and data, because that's what drives the business. Like, that's how you know where a business is going, right? Is like what is actually yeah, like what activity is required to produce a certain thing, but it all starts with belief. Do you actually believe it's whatever? Anyway, but he was talking about colleges, and if colleges had to reveal their data and their actual statistics on people who go to college and then the kind of job they get and the debt incurred and the actual pay they get, like nobody would go to college because their rates are abysmal. I mean, it's crazy. But that's a societal story that you have to have some kind of a degree or education or training in order to do something. But we're totally discrediting the fact that God qualifies the called.
Right.
He doesn't call the qualified a lot of times.
Amen.
We know this. I mean, I don't know if that's actually I don't think that's an actual Bible verse. I mean, there are definitely lots of verses around that, but not those specific words. But I think we see that a lot, especially I think in the network marketing industry.
Yeah.
That
my bachelor's degree is in criminal justice.
Oh, there you go. And I have a degree in Spanish. Like what? I have a bachelor's degree in Spanish. Like, I don't know. I got the whole societal message of go to college and get a degree, but I didn't actually go to college for something that was like, I don't know. I don't know. And it doesn't matter because I don't use it. It's just ironic that, we have our own stories, but we let societal stories drive us as well. And if we can step back and trust our gut and be able to hear the voice that God's put inside of us, right? That we can trust that, and we can do things regardless of if we have a piece of paper. Will the piece of paper make us feel better? It might, but actually, as someone who is an achiever, who wants the pieces of paper and who has done these things, there's always another one to get.
Yeah.
And you're never actually satisfied, and you never really feel like you've done enough to be the voice that can, be the gut health coach or be the metabolism coach or understand whatever, X, Y, Z, right? And so we need to understand those stories that are driving us, society and our own. Like our own are formed from, like you said, childhood, but also influenced by society, influenced by what we take those stories we've heard and make them mean for ourselves. Yeah. So true.
So good. Okay, it'll come back to me.
I know, right? I do that all the time. It's
like, one thing too about, we're not saying education is bad, but it's not the be all end all those. Yeah. And as an adult, like if you want to take a class or take a course or do a certification because it's something that's interesting to you, like I recently got a certification in menopause coaching because I was having a lot of symptoms that I didn't understand and I was having trouble getting answers to. So I did it for me. And can it help other people? Sure. But it was something that I wanted to do. I don't feel like it's made me an expert or, given me a leg up over anybody else. Do I have some more information, some other resources? Yes. But
it's not
that doesn't define who I am.
Right. It's not about what you know. It's about what you do with what you know.
Right.
And so much, honestly, because I've done the same thing. I mean, I got certified as a coach in the first place because I wanted to understand how to coach myself better and coach my team better.
Right.
And then like I've just layered on that when I got certified to become a personal trainer. I wanted to know about my body and how to challenge it and move it so that I could understand it for myself, and obviously, but there's so much of like how many books do we have to read, how many courses do we have to take until we realize that we're just acquiring knowledge and we're not actually doing anything with it. And realizing that you can do all the things you want to do without feeling like you need something first. Like you can literally just go do it. Right. And that might be a story you're telling yourself. I do hear that a lot, that like, oh, well, no one will take me seriously unless I have this certification. And it's like, well, do you take yourself seriously without that certification? The answer is probably no. Right now, because of the story you're telling yourself. So what's the story you could tell yourself instead that you'll believe?
Right.
But that's actually going to drive you to build your business without that certification or without feeling the need like you need a certification, right? And maybe that's, I'm someone who, it lives these things. So I can teach these things.
Yeah, right.
I don't know, something like that.
and work that backward. Like, where did that come from? Who told you that you need to have a degree or certification or whatever it is to be able to do the thing that you're wanting to do? Figure that out. And it's interesting because sometimes when Kindra talks about this on page 19, truth versus fiction.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Page 19, she talks about the truth versus the fiction. So we may have a story in our head that we might take to the grave. We swear it's exactly the way it happened. But, when you start asking some people around you or doing a little bit, digging, it may not be the way it worked out at all. But for some reason, you remembered it a certain way, or somebody told it to you a certain way, and that's what you remembered. Like, she tells a story about her little girl. I think she thought she got knocked over by a dog. She wrote an essay, and she talked about
and it wasn't actually her. It was her.
It wasn't even her. It was her brother. Yeah. But she remembers that, and she swore it was her, right? And that's, she wrote this essay about it and all the things. So anyway, it just made me laugh, but it's so true. Like, what stories are we carrying around that we swear happened to us or happened a certain way? And, so talk about false evidence, right? I mean, how is that story that may not even be true? Not that it's no longer serving you. It may truly not be true. Like, how many of those are you carrying around too?
Oh gosh, that is so true. Well, and I think what I have learned and what I want everyone else to learn is that our brains can't separate reality from what we tell it.
Right.
And once you learn that, which I think brings us to our next question about visualization. Visualization is a powerful tool because your brain can't separate reality from what you tell it and what you choose to focus on. And one thing I've been saying lately to myself and to those I'm coaching is that don't be surprised when you get the thing that you're focusing on. So if you're focusing on, there's how many days do we have left in the month? Like 5 days left, not even, something like that. And I've got this much volume I want to bring into my business. That's a lot. I don't know how I'm going to do that. If you're focusing on that, and then don't be surprised when you don't hit your goal and you don't do it. Versus, I've got 5 days left. Like, man, I've got so much time. I've got so many people that I'm talking to. Like, that is going to be easy. Don't be surprised when you hit it and probably surpass it because you're coming from a different angle and you're focusing on something. And I think that that's the thing. We tend to be really surprised by the outcomes we're getting. But we shouldn't be if we're focused, because it's an indicator what we're focusing on, right? It indicates what we've been focusing on all along, whether you're going to lose it or there's actually a big possibility for you to gain a bunch through it. So,
Well, and there's a difference too between visualizing and wishing. So when you visualize something, you're willing to put the energy into it to do those things that you're seeing. Wishing is when you're sitting on the deck, reading a book, eating a box of bonbons, thinking that all of this volume is going to happen. Well, it may or may not if you've already put in the work. But if you haven't put in the work, that's not visualization. That's just fantasy. So,
well, and I know you and I talked about that when we didn't earn the last trip. We didn't work for it either. So I would be surprised when all of a sudden it's the last day to qualify and we haven't done it yet. Like, well, we didn't work for it, right? Like, that wasn't a target for us. And so that didn't surprise me. I was like, yeah, that makes sense, and so then I can then celebrate everyone else who did, because they did the work, right? They showed up and that was their goal and they did it. And
and like you said, Chelsey, your brain is, one of its main jobs is to protect you. So when you're visualizing, if you're visualizing yourself on this trip or meeting a new customer or buying a new house or whatever the thing is, when it happens, your brain can get behind it 100% because it's been preparing. It's kind of like when you take your child to school for the first time, right? You're probably talking about that. Maybe you've gone to the school beforehand, maybe you've gone and played on the playground, you've driven by, you bought a lunchbox, like you've done all of these things to prepare them. It's not like one day school starts and you dump them off and first they're going to freak out, right? Because they had no preparation. You did all these things ahead of time. That's exactly what you do with your brain when you visualize. You're giving it all of these little bites. So when the thing does happen, your whole body is
Right.
in alignment, right?
Yeah.
It was expecting it. It can support it, and everybody's
Mhm.
happy.
Well, and then I think two things from that. So on page 21, when she talks about Michael Phelps and how he actually
Yeah.
visualizes himself like going through the motions of that race,
Yes.
so that when he does it, his brain's already like there. And then, and visualizing, at least for me, when I do visualization work, I focus on a very detailed experience as if I am having it now. So I know when I was building my business to, director, first level, I spent time walking through that situation of like, what is the music I'm hearing right now? Who are the people that are cheering me on? Who's at the end of that stage clapping for me and celebrating the success with me? What am I wearing? Like, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
All of these things. And then walking through that as if it is happening now. And because your brain can't separate reality from what you tell it, your body gets that feeling. And so then that's what, when you do that visualization, your brain is going to look for ways to prove that, because it's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when your brain looks for evidence to prove the stories you're telling it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so typically it works against us when we're trying to grow, because it's looking for all the ways like this won't work. There's no way, it's not reality. But when we learn this, we can actually make it work for us instead of against us.
Right.
And so then it's looking for, okay, well, I've already experienced this because of that visualization. Our brain thinks that we've already done this. So, okay, how did we do this? And then it's going to actively look like you're having conversations, and now you're picking up on things you wouldn't otherwise pick up on, and you're asking better questions, and guess what? You're bringing on more customers, and it's like, it seems easy, and people probably looking at you will be like, oh, it comes so naturally to you. And it's like, oh no, I've done the work in my brain first. So then my actions are aligning after the fact, right?
Yeah. I saw an interview with, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm not a big tennis fan, but
I don't know.
I'm not even going to try. But he's like the top rated men's tennis player. And I guess the US Open is this week. So anyway, the interviewer said to him, it seems to me that your greatest gift is your mindset. But he made it sound like it's just like a natural ability that he has, is his mindset. And this tennis player said, oh, I need to correct you. It is a gift, but it's nothing that was born, nothing I was born with. It is something I work on every day of my life. And I thought, that's right, dude. Like that. I mean, he gets it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that people think that when they look at us of like, oh, it's an overnight success, but what they don't see is every single day we're doing the mindset work. Right. And I'll be the first to say that when I don't take the time to do the mindset work each day, I am always surprised at how the day turns out crappy. But then at the same time, I'm not, because I understand like what am I focusing on today? Well, first of all, I rolled out of bed and I was in reaction mode, right? Like not helpful. Why? Because the night before, maybe I watched some TV that I probably should have turned off and just gone to bed. And because I rolled out of bed and I'm in reaction mode, I didn't do my journaling. I didn't get time in the Word. I didn't, like all the things, right? Like I didn't come into my day with calmness. And so having that self-awareness is probably, I would say, our biggest superpower when it comes to self-coaching and doing this mindset work. And I think that that's the next thing we wanted to talk about. I think, did you want to skip ahead to 7 and kind of go over that real briefly before we wrap up? Like the different.
So this is, Kindra points out that what we think happens and what actually happens are two different things. And so what people think happens is that there's an event, you experience something, and then you respond to it, and then there's a result, right? So when you think of life in that way, it's like you really have no control. You're just a victim of your circumstances, right? And if good things happen to you, great. If bad things happen to you, great. And people who really believe in these 3 different things are people who do not feel in control of their life, and they are probably more prone to comparison and jealousy and negativity towards people who they may see as being more successful than they are. Okay, so if that's you, no harm, no foul. It's very common. It's what we're taught. So But here's what really happens. You have an event, something happens, and then you have a story. So it's not that you experience something and you don't think about it. You know you do. You stop and you have an emotion about it. You think about it. You create a story. And then based on that story, you have a response. That's your behavior. And then a result happens. So another way to think about this, if you've done mindset coaching, if you've read any of Craig Rochelle's books, he talks about this a lot, but our feelings create our thoughts, which create our behavior, which create our results. Same thing, except Kindra talks about the event creates the story, creates the response, which creates the result. So that second piece is key. It's that story and that thought that changes the whole rest of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I think that's where we've successfully coached our clients inside CC too, is that, we ask them, tell us a situation that happened this week. And, someone will say, well, I sent a message and they didn't respond. Okay. All right. So that's data, right? You sent a message, they didn't respond. Okay, great. Like you could go to court and you could prove that, but that happened, right? That's the event. But then you tell yourself, here's the story. They must hate me. I'm annoying them, right? When really they got busy, or their kid took their phone as they were, going to respond, or any number of things. But it doesn't matter, because we're telling ourselves a story about that. And so if we can just go back, because if we're telling ourselves, oh, I'm being annoying, I must have annoyed them, they're not responding, well, then that's going to make us feel doubt, and that's going to make us question ourselves, right? So then we go into a spiral of behaviors of like, oh my gosh, I'm no good at this business. Like people are ghosting me, like they hate me. Oh my gosh, I should quit my business. So then you don't send any more messages, right? Like, because who's going to send a message in that state versus telling yourself, well, they must have just gotten busy. It's okay. I'm going to send them a reminder because I know that this is important, and they've expressed that changing their health is important to me. Yeah. So it's my duty to make sure that they're okay, right? Like, and help them. And it really
and there is data, right? Because sometimes too, people, when you ask people, well, tell me about that, they're really quick to say, well, I don't know. Or I don't know.
I don't know is not allowed.
I don't know is not allowed. And Kindra talks about that too. She said there is no story. There's always a story. There's always a thought. There's always a reason. You may not want to go that deep and find out what it is, because all of this, you guys, stems back to personal responsibility, right? You are the person who's responsible for your behavior at the end of the day. And so sometimes you might not want to go there. That may be the thing that's causing you to not want to identify the story. Sometimes it's become such a habit that it really is hard to identify, because it's become so much a part of your identity, or something that you do so routinely that it's hard to pull it out, right? And really talk about it. Kindra talks about this in this chapter, that she had something visualized about how she wanted something to go with, like a proposal for a speaking engagement or something at a really large event. And it came much quicker than she was anticipating. So her first thought was no. And everybody who in her close circle was like, why? Like, this is what you've been wanting. And she's like, well, I don't know why. And so she had to get quiet and, spend some time really digging into why did she have that adverse reaction to this situation that she had been visualizing and was actually working really hard for. No story is that's false. There is a story there somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, if you're watching this and you have not read this chapter, what chapter is this specifically?
Chapter 3.
It's the last one in part 1.
Page 30.
This breaks it down. Yeah. Chapter 3, start on page 30. She breaks it down exactly into creating awareness around your stories, about if you want to change them, and starting, I mean, I think that's going to get into the second section, but catching yourself in the act, right? And being able to dig deeper. And I just did this, this not last week, but the weekend before, when I was at 10X Ladies in Miami. I I typically notice from behaviors, not necessarily what I'm telling myself. Sometimes what I'm telling myself, I'll be able to catch that. But honestly, a lot of times those are on such a subconscious level for me that it's more of like I notice in my behaviors. And for me, old stories like to show up as me grasping for value for myself. And so when I feel uncomfortable going into a situation where I'm a small fish in a big pond with big fish, I want to make sure that my hair is done right, or that I need to go buy a new outfit, or like I just feel that overwhelming compulsion to like go do those things, go shop, like I don't know, like just to make myself present a certain way. And so I was able to see that, and so I got quiet, right? Like thankfully I didn't have like a bathroom floor crying session questioning everything in my life, but I was able to notice these things coming up. And so I spent some time journaling of like, why am I feeling this way? You know, why do I feel, you know, this urge to do these things, which I'm not going to do these things, but why am I feeling that? And so really it boiled down to the story of I don't belong. And that's a story that has been in my brain for my whole life. Like my parents divorced when I was 1, and then my mom and dad each remarried, and I had siblings through both of them. And so I never had a place that I remember where I 100% belonged, you know, because I was the outsider always. And then every time, you know, we moved, like I have very specific instances of feeling like the outsider. And now I'm a military wife. We're always the outsider. And so it's so funny that like, you know, I've had to create some serious awareness around this and, you know, essentially ask myself like, well, do I want to be the outsider? Or, you know, and like telling myself that I'm always the outsider, I'm always the odd man out, like, or I don't belong. Well, how about instead? And so this is what I realized, like, I'm someone who puts myself in uncomfortable situations because I want to grow. And I know that's going to challenge me, but also I create belonging for other people. And so through this, I was able to connect with other women everyone had the same story. I don't belong here. Like, I don't look like these successful women, because we had this idea of what successful women look like, which when I talk to these women, we're like, well, that's not who we are anyways. Like, we don't value those kinds of things that they do. And that's okay. Like, we're natural women. Like, we, you know, we take care of our skin, we take care of our health. Like, we don't do certain things that a lot of women do. And so we were able to like create this belonging together, this community of like, we're natural women who are authentic and genuine, and we do belong here, and we belong together, and we're all here to grow, and we're going to do that. And we can feel comfortable and confident in that place that we've created. And so it totally shifted my thinking while I was there, and it shifted honestly just my belief and, you know, what I'm working for in everything. But it wouldn't have happened unless I got quiet and dug into why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking this way? And all of those things, right? Like, what is the thing that's triggering me? What is my response? What's the actual data here? And how can I separate all of these things?
Well, Chelsey, I think that's a great story to close out this session, because belonging, that's not just something people want, like that's a human need, right? Like we need to be loved and cared for. And I mean, if, you know, babies will die, failure to thrive is a real thing, right? If somebody doesn't care for them and love them and nurture them. And I mean, we carry along that with us as we're adults, but we have more freedom to find a niche when we're adults. And so I just want to read on page 51, Kindra says, that story piece, again, that's the thought, the story piece of the process between event and response is owned by you. It is your choice. Choosing what story or stories you tell yourself can change your response, which in turn changes your results. Put that on repeat and suddenly your life can look wholly different. While you don't get a choice in whether or not stories are being told, like it or not, the story is happening. The good news is that the choice of which stories you tell is entirely yours. And then her last sentence is, if you can change your story, you can change your life.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for doing this with me, Francine. And
yes,
I think we've had great discussion. I love growing with you, Francine, and you challenge me to challenge my stories all the time. And I know that I'm sure I challenge you too in my tough love.
In a good way. Yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah. I mean, and
I love it.
yeah, it's great. So we don't want to be around people who are clones to us because then you don't grow. So
No,
it's,
and I think that that's the thing that, Francine and I challenge each other so much is because we're not the same. Like
mhm,
we have very like similar core values and things, but like who we are, like we are different, and our backstory and our background, and a
right.
lot of those things. And I think that that's probably what makes it such a cool dynamic and collaboration that
Yeah.
you know I think the community that we've created gets so much more value
Hmm.
because we're so much more well-rounded, because
Hmm.
we balance each other out and we're different and we
Yeah,
don't think exactly the same, and we don't have the same stories. I think that that's really cool and totally God ordained. We both know that.
absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. Well, we'll see everybody later this week for section
Yep.
2.
That's
Okay.
right. So get
All
to
right.
reading, listen on 2x speed if you have to, take some notes. And either way, show up. We're going to have great questions and discussion for you guys here. Take
Yep.
care.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.